It's on the book, by the way. Welcome to Hannity. We are in Washington, D.C. This is a Fox News alert. Breaking right now, Fox News has now learned that the FBI supplemental report about Judge Kavanaugh could be delivered to the White House as soon as tomorrow. Now, this couldn't come at a more important time. Dems are now saying they didn't want it made public. That's interesting. Now, everything we hold dear as Americans now weighs in the balance as desperate Democrats, people on the left, are trying to unload even more insanity tonight on Brett Kavanaugh, zero consideration of his family. Now, the looming confirmation of Judge Brett Kavanaugh represents so much more than just one seat on the U.S. Supreme Court. Where we end up as a country, that hangs in the balance. What we're seeing now is a battle for what is basic human rights and decency, those values that made this country great. On the left, you have Democrats trying to end due process, all presumption of innocence. That's so dangerous for you and your family. Now, they're also asking the American people to suspend every bit of common sense and decency we were all born with and believe that a man with an impeccable 40-year track record is a monster involved in gang rape and drugging young girls, totally uncorroborated and refuted. Fights on boats in Rhode Island, the allegations since recanted. He's never been to Rhode Island. Wild parties. Not one person can confirm his attendance. Nobody. And now a completely ridiculous story from the New York Times about, get this, an ice throwing incident. And Democrats want the FBI to investigate this. Kavanaugh may have once thrown some ice cubes at a bar. This is what it's reduced to. Now, when we come up in the course of this program tonight, we're going to expose the left's two-faced attempt to take out Judge Kavanaugh. 5 weeks from tonight, 35 days, the most important midterm in our lifetime. Do you want Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer? You want Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein, Maxine Waters, Michael Avenatti controlling your future? Buckle up. It's time for our D.C. breaking news opening monologue. All right, so with the midterm elections just around the corner, 5 weeks from tonight, 35 days, the results, you'll be watching them come in. The stakes could not be any more obvious. Do you like human rights? Do you like our Constitution? Do you value fair trials, due process, presumption of innocence? Do you value simple, basic, God-given common sense? Or do you want a new standard, guilt by accusation? If you care, and you should, get to the polls 5 weeks from tonight, because Democrats, they are now trying to literally upend our entire system just so they can block a Supreme Court nomination and get power. And tonight, President Trump is fighting back. He is standing by Judge Kavanaugh, and he's calling on the Senate to send him to the U.S. Supreme Court. Here's what he said.
They've been trying to destroy Judge Kavanaugh since the very first second he was announced, because they know Judge Kavanaugh will follow the Constitution as written. And a man's life is in tatters. A man's life is shattered. His wife is shattered. His daughters, who are beautiful, incredible young kids. They destroy people. They want to destroy people. These are really evil people.
As I have said so many times, if Judge Kavanaugh's life is ruined because of refuted allegations with no evidence, no corroboration, guess what? You can be next. People you love could be next. Look at his track record. It's decades now in public service, in very high-profile jobs, 6, now 7 FBI background checks, hundreds and hundreds of character witnesses that say he is a cut above. Not a single allegation against him until 16 days ago. If we lose the presumption of innocence in this country, I promise you it's never coming back. And today, President Trump issued this very serious warning. Let's take a look.
It's a very scary time for young men in America when you can be guilty of something that you may not be guilty of. This is a very difficult time. What's happening here has much more to do than even the appointment of a Supreme Court justice. It really does. You could be somebody that was perfect your entire life, and somebody could accuse you of something. Doesn't necessarily have to be a woman, as everybody says, but somebody could accuse you of something, and you're automatically guilty. But in this realm, you are truly guilty until proven innocent.
35 days before an election, at least tonight, we have confirmation that Democrats clearly do not care about fundamental rights, the Constitution. Democrats apparently don't care if free people, if their lives are ruined, their families are ruined. Clearly, they just want to win. It's about power. Just look at what they have been using to smear Judge Kavanaugh. It was an uncorroborated sexual misconduct allegation from Professor Ford. She said there was an eyewitness. The eyewitness says it didn't happen. Republicans rightfully took that story seriously. They conducted a full investigation. Professor Ford doesn't remember a date, a day of the week, a location, or how she got to or from the location where the alleged crime took place. No corroborating evidence of any kind, no forensic evidence of any kind. 36 years ago, no one can back up her story in any way. All four witnesses listed by Ford to corroborate her claims deny having any knowledge of what she is alleging. All four in sworn statements under penalty of felony, including one of Ford's lifelong friends. Now, Democrats and a few spineless Republicans tonight, they thought this baseless accusation deserved an FBI background check. It's now well underway. According to reports at this hour, the investigation is now expected to wrap up tomorrow. And a source is telling us here at Fox that those who were interviewed continue to refute or deny any knowledge of Professor Ford's claims. Now, next up, you've got your corrupt media, which is an arm of the Democratic Party. I've told you in 2007, journalism's dead. They pushed a claim from a woman who thinks she may have potentially witnessed Kavanaugh expose himself at a college party. This was, of course, printed. Well, then she would find out from the New York Times she wasn't exactly sure Kavanaugh was the perpetrator and was calling former Yale classmates to ask them and calling around to friends. Do you remember the incident? They did not. She even acknowledges significant memory gaps from the evening. New York Times refused to run the story because of lack of evidence. But let not your heart be troubled. We're going to get back to the Times in a moment. Now, first, we have a third claim, a woman named Julie Swetnick, who's being represented by anti-Trump zealot Michael Avenatti. And she's alleging Kavanaugh, get this, was involved in regular, serial, drugging, gang raping, what was a scheme that went on almost every weekend, 10 parties she went to, when she was in college and Brett Kavanaugh was in high school, where boys would drug these young girls, line up in the hall so they can rape them. NBC News actually aired this interview where she backtracked tremendously. How they aired this with zero corroboration is beyond any journalistic ethical standards. Take a look.
In that statement, Swetnick said she became aware of efforts by Kavanaugh and his friend Mark Judge to spike punch at parties. In our interview, she said she saw them near the punch, but did not specifically say she saw either man spike it.
Did you see Brett Kavanaugh, spiking the punch, putting grain alcohol in the punch?
I saw him giving red Solo cups to quite a few girls during that time frame. I saw him around the punch, I won't say bowls, or the punch containers. I don't know what he did, but I saw him buy them.
Are there friends who remember these parties too and remember you?
Oh, I think everybody in the county remembers those parties.
Because we haven't heard from those friends, so I'm asking, are there people alive today who would say, I went to those parties with
Yes,
Julie?
there are people that know about those parties.
This morning, Swetnick provided 4 names of friends she says went to the parties with her. One of them said he does not recall a Julie Swetnick. Another of the friends she named is deceased. We've reached out to the other 2 and haven't heard back.
Now, remember, NBC News is perfectly happy airing that interview despite no corroborations. One of the 4, I don't know who she is, one is dead. Backtracking is spectacular in this case. And remember, the same network sat on the Juanita Broderick interview because they could not verify her claims. The same NBC that punted Ronan Farrow's report on Harvey Weinstein. Now, literally, when you thought it couldn't get any more absurd, the New York Times publishing a story about a claim that Kavanaugh may have once actually thrown ice at a man in a bar in college for some unknown reason. And as it turns out, the so-called journalist that authored that piece for the New York Times against Kavanaugh was a partisan hack. In fact, she came out on Twitter against the confirmation of Judge Kavanaugh the very night he was nominated, just like most Democrats. One Democratic senator from Hawaii is now laughably, although sadly, calling for an investigation into this horrific instance. of ice throwing. I'm not making this up. The same senator that told men to shut up and sit down. Take a look.
These police documents that show that Brett Kavanaugh threw ice in someone's face during a bar fight when he was in college. Do you feel that that is in any way disqualifying for someone to sit in the Supreme Court?
This is why we need an FBI investigation, because there are a lot of allegations and the reports really are about how he behaves when he is drunk.
Here we are tonight, uncorroborated misconduct claims with no evidence to now absurd, really dangerous claims of gang rape on a almost weekend basis to ice throwing at a bar. Even a new claim from Senator Camille Harris that an unknown Jane Doe was raped in a car during an unknown time or place. That just came out today. And now the ACLU, which used to care supposedly about civil liberties, they're now asking you to suspend all presumption of innocence. The ACLU, they want you to believe Kavanaugh is just like Bill Cosby, and they're spending a fortune to run this despicable ad. Take a look.
We've seen this before, denials from powerful men.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
I've never seen anything like this.
I categorically and unequivocally deny the allegation against me by Dr. Ford.
America is watching, and as we choose a lifetime seat on our highest court, we cannot have any doubt.
ACLU, civil liberties? No, just a national disgrace, part of the smear merchant campaign society. Meanwhile, left-wing protesters have actively tried to bully Republican senators. Remember there was the Attorney General of Florida, Pam Bondi, Secretary Nielsen, Homeland Security, Senator Ted Cruz, then, of course, Sarah Sanders, Maxine Waters urging people to get in other people's faces, following into gas stations and grocery stores. Well, Mitch McConnell was accosted at the airport yesterday. Let's look at this.
Do you want the Republican Party to be the public party that is known for promoting rape and sexual assault? How many stories of sexual violence do you need to hear in order to believe women? Senator McConnell, do you always turn your back on women like this?
And according now tonight to FoxNews.com, many protests like the one you saw, they're being organized, funded, actually shockingly, by George Soros and a group that he's backing. He's the extremely wealthy liberal billionaire who wants to take away your Second Amendment rights, and he has a different version of what America should be, obviously. Oh, a global world. I believe in the United States of America. And as you can see, the left is trying to bully everyone and anyone into believing these smears. They want you to forget Kavanaugh's life of accomplishment, his 40 years of an impeccable track record. They want you to accept the most wild, absurd, he's an alcoholic, degenerate, gang rapist, guy that drugged women when he was a teenager. Oh, these yearbook pictures, beer drinking, ice throwing. I don't remember any outrage, by the way, over Obama's own account, former president, of his wild high school party days. Maybe the media needs to go back down memory lane. Here's a Hannity history lesson.
I spent the last 2 years of high school in a daze, blocking away the questions that life seemed insistent on posing. I kept playing basketball, attended classes sparingly, drank beer heavily, and tried drugs enthusiastically. I discovered that it didn't make any difference whether you smoked reefer in the white classmate's sparkling new van, or in the dorm room with some brother you'd met down at the gym, or on the beach with a couple of Hawaiian kids who had dropped out of school and now spent most of their time looking for an excuse to brawl.
Well, he didn't throw ice at anybody. And, of course, that's just one small part of the Democrats' overwhelmingly blatant double standard. Bill Clinton, Exhibit A, absolutely revered by almost everybody in the Democratic Party. They stood by his side, supported him, even after allegations of rape rolled in. There was Paula Jones, Kathleen Willey, Juanita Broderick. Democrats never claimed they had a right to be believed. None of them. How about an FBI investigation into Juanita? They never stood up for any of those victims, despite corroborating and forensic evidence. Hillary Clinton even accused of trying to silence those victims. But, of course, she's now weighing in hypocritically on all this. Take a look.
Brett Kavanaugh said that the, quote, political hit job, end quote, directed at him was being done on behalf of the Clintons, among other people. Your response?
I mean, really, yes, it deserves a lot of laughter. I thought it was just part of the whole of his very defensive and unconvincing presentation.
Zero self-awareness. She really is the perfect representation of what is now a one-sided Democratic Party. There's no more moderates in the Democratic Party. It's a party now of smearing, slanders, lies, besmirchment, character assassination, character bludgeoning, with a laughable, sad double standard. And don't forget about the deputy chair of this party, the DNC, Keith Ellison. He's facing abuse allegations leveled by his ex-girlfriend, Karen Monahan, who's reportedly produced medical records, therapist notes, text messages, and apparently she has recordings as well. But the left doesn't believe her. And by the way, they're not standing by her side. Neither did the lawyer who cleared Ellison in a report to the state Democratic Party of Minnesota. Her law firm donated $500,000 to the Democrats. Well, now the police are looking into it tonight. Now, there's Senator Cory Booker, a.k.a. Spartacus. In 1992, look at what he wrote in his own high school groping escapades. While the Senate Democrats demand an FBI investigation into Kavanaugh's high school years, what about his misconduct? Now we have also tonight Beto O'Rourke. He's the liberal hero running against Senator Ted Cruz in Texas. Tonight he's facing a new scandal. Why? Over his theater review that he authored, where he writes, quote, actresses whose only qualifications seem to be their phenomenally large breasts and tight buttocks. He has since apologized. Oh, I bet he did in a campaign year. And as you can imagine, Democratic leadership, they still support him all the way. It's no wonder he's best friends with Chucky Schumer, who would love to welcome the very liberal O'Rourke to the Senate. Here's where we are tonight. As we speak, the Kavanaugh nomination remains in the balance. Senator Bob Corker is now predicting that Kavanaugh will be confirmed. I wouldn't be so sure. Look at your screen. 3 senators will be deciding votes on whether or not Judge Kavanaugh is confirmed. It's in their hands tonight. They will decide if due process matters. They will decide whether a man who lived an exemplary life will be destroyed with no evidence of corroboration and no presumption of innocence. Will these senators be bullied by the left, or will they do the right thing? 35 days from tonight, 5 weeks from tonight, you get to weigh in. Hopefully you'll tune into the Fox News channel. Every network will cover the midterm elections. This is now a choice between one party in America that is so power hungry that they will destroy a man, destroy his wife, destroy his kids and family because of their thirst for power. This is a group of people who have tried to undermine the president, his agenda since day one. Reckless claims about Russia collusion. They offer no solutions to make your life better, the life of the forgotten men and women in this country. 5 weeks from tonight, you will either see a giddy news media announcing Nancy Pelosi as the next Speaker of the House, Maxine Waters as a chairman of a committee in the House, and Chuck Schumer will be the head of the Senate. It would be ecstatic at all of that. Or 5 weeks from tonight, you can again shock the world. And you can tune in and watch the media and the left in this country have a collective meltdown. And they'll once again go down in a stunning defeat. You get to decide. 5 weeks from tonight. Joining us now with reaction, Senator Lindsey Graham. Senator, thank you. You've been giving us updates every step of the way. What's the latest?
Well, the Kavanaugh bump is real. There's the biggest change in the 2018 midterms of political observation. In North Dakota, 60 to 28, he should be confirmed. Every race in these Trump red states held by a Democrat, there's been a surge by Republicans. Why? Whether you're a Trump Republican, a Libertarian, Vegetarian, McCain Republican, Romney Republican, Bush Republican, you're mad as hell because we're all united that this is unfair. What they're doing to this good, decent man cannot stand. So the Republican of the year will be a Democrat, not a Republican. You've been able to do something, my friends on the other side, I could never do. Unite this party.
And the anger's real.
Well, but to do it, you had to destroy a good man. And the only way he stays destroyed if we buy into this trap.
You know, if every single solitary...
Put him on the court is the only antidote, is the only just
But you were
solution.
a prosecutor.
Right.
When you see no corroboration.
I don't prosecute.
Okay. You don't prosecute.
The law requires you to tell the accused where it happened, when it happened, and to have corroboration that it did happen. My beef is not with Dr. Ford. I think she's been used and abused. My beef is with the Democratic Party, who laid in wait, betrayed her trust, who didn't tell her we'd go to California. My beef is with the fact that they've done everything they can do to destroy his life. If you don't believe he's a gang rapist, if you don't believe he's a sexual predator, if you don't believe he's a stumbling, bumbling drunk, how about he doesn't have the temperament? This is the one that bothers me the most. He apologized to Amy Klobuchar for snapping at her. What would you do if you were accused of all these things, had your life ruined? Here's what I think. Amy Klobuchar should apologize to Judge Kavanaugh and his family for being part of a smear campaign I haven't seen in over 20 years in politics.
What about these red state Democrats?
I think they're toast.
All of them?
All of them.
All of them politically.
That vote, anybody votes
no. Well, the only two that are open seemingly to even...
No, they're toast if they vote no. And they should be. President Trump won these states, promising to nominate conservative judges as well qualified. This is a Bush guy. He worked for the Bush White House. He's as mainstream as you can get. He's been on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals for 12 years. Glowing assessments of his credibility, his integrity before this hearing. Now, if you're going to reward people for destroying his life by questioning his temperament, then you're setting in motion the destruction of the judiciary. To any Republican who wants to question Kavanaugh's temperament, what you're doing is rewarding the people who have put him in this box.
5 weeks from tonight, the results at this time will start flowing in.
Yeah.
And it went pretty viral, your comments on this program last night, and you said that if you fall one vote short, that this election 5 weeks from tonight should be a referendum that the president could renominate Kavanaugh with a new Senate and enough votes to confirm him.
Yeah, let's let the people decide whether or not their senator was right in voting no against this good man. Corker made an observation that we've got the votes, and here's what I would say to Bob. I think you're right, but we've got to wait on the FBI report. Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins really wanted the FBI to validate the committee's work. They're just about done. I'm confident both of them, if there's no change, if the FBI learns nothing new about the Ford allegation or legitimacy to Ramirez, that they're going to vote for Kavanaugh because we've done everything within reason. And I hope Jeff Flake will also, because he voted yes in committee. And now he's talking about temperament and yearbook entries. To those who question the yearbook entries, just listen to what you're saying. You're going to decide this man's fate based on a yearbook entry.
Tonight. Look at ice throwing, the senator from Hawaii.
The devil triangle. If you got to doubt what it really means, go back and talk to Judge Kavanaugh himself. Don't humiliate this man.
Is the FBI, there was one report tonight that they haven't talked to Dr. Ford. Is there a need to talk to her after she's been on the record?
The last thing Dr. Ford needs, in my view, is to go through the ringer again. She came forward to the committee. She couldn't tell us anything new in person. I think something really did happen to her. I am convinced it wasn't Brett Kavanaugh. If she was wrong about her best friend being at the party, what else was she wrong about? Her best friend says, you know, I'm not here to refute her claim. I'm just saying I've never met Brett Kavanaugh. How do you know you just had one beer and you can't remember anything else?
You know, Senator, you've been a force for fairness in this.
Tried to be.
This shouldn't be Republican or Democrat.
Well, it sure is now.
Yeah, and you voted.
To every Republican, listen, if you don't get what they're doing.
You voted for both of Obama's nominees.
Yeah, I did.
Republicans didn't act this way.
Yeah, for a good reason.
Senator, good to see you. Thank you for
He's going to get on the court. He's going to get on the court.
Okay, thank you. When we come back, we're going to unpack all the latest with Alan Dershowitz, Sarah Carter, Greg Jarrett, as we continue from the swamp. We're in Washington, D.C. Professor Alan Dershowitz, he tweeted, quote, Swetnick affidavit should be thoroughly investigated by the FBI and her alleged witnesses, named and questioned. If perjured, there should be consequences. Here now with reaction, author of the New York Times bestseller, The Russia Hoax, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, author of another bestseller, The Case Against Impeaching Trump, Harvard Law School professor Alan Dershowitz, Fox News contributor Sarah Carter in D.C. When you saw the interview that I don't think ever should have aired, Professor, and all of the backtracking, well, he was near the punch bowl. Well, it wasn't a line. She was claiming originally that there was systemic, regular drugging and gang raping of young girls and that she had attended 10 of these events, but it happened almost every weekend, she said. And nobody told a parent, a teacher, or law enforcement 36 years ago, but it happened regularly. Then she backs off. What should happen?
Well, first, I'm glad that they ran the interview. I think it's an education moment. I think the FBI ought to investigate. And if it turns out that she made it up out of whole cloth, that she never met Kavanaugh, that she was several years older than him, that she, along with others or by herself, simply made up a story, the FBI should conclude that. She should be tried for perjury, and she should be sent to prison. This becomes a very important education moment, because we have to teach the women of the world and the men of the world that there is no genetically linked aspect of telling the truth, that women make up stories out of whole cloth about alleged events that never occurred, and that's why it's so important. But look, we know this happens so many times, but this is an education moment. The world is watching. That's why she is the most important subject of the FBI investigation.
What about her inconsistencies? She backtracked spectacularly in this interview. She mentioned 4 people to corroborate. 1 is dead, 2 didn't respond, and 1 said, I never heard of her.
You're being generous to her when you say she backtracked. She swore under oath, subject to felony and perjury, that certain things happened. She then said they didn't happen, and she changed her view. Any good prosecutor, if the evidence shows that she made it up out of whole cloth, should be able to prosecute her and sentence her to prison. The problem is women who lie and falsely accuse men get away with it. They don't go to prison. And President Trump was absolutely right when he talked about how young men are vulnerable, young women are vulnerable.
Scary.
There is too much sexual assault, but there's too many false accusations of sexual assault, and the FBI must get to the bottom as to whether
I would
this
even
is
argue
one
it's
such
not
example.
Fair. There is evil. There are predators. There are people that commit atrocities like rape and assault and drugging, and it doesn't help the case of those women that are real victims.
But even putting aside who it helps, the idea that a woman will get away with having made a willful decision to falsely accuse somebody.
What about the attorney,
most heinous
Professor?
Crime, well, we have to ask that question. I've asked Hannity to waive lawyer-client privilege so the FBI can ask her, how did the story begin? Did Hannity help you? Did he make the story more elaborate?
Wow.
We've got to get to the bottom of this.
Greg Jarrett, let me ask you the same question. And I will tell you this. I learned a lot when I was in Atlanta. I didn't rush to judgment on Richard Jewell, nor did I do it in Duke Lacrosse, nor did I do it in Ferguson or Baltimore or Cambridge Police or Trayvon Martin, as others did. There's way too much rushing to judgment in this country, especially by my so-called colleagues in the media.
I agree with the professor. Julie Swetnick would appear to be in legal jeopardy, and here's why. Perjury is a material false statement that is willful and deliberate and purposeful. Her sworn statement is dramatically different than what she told NBC News. She would be well advised to fire Michael Avenatti, the publicity-seeking carnival barker, and hire a real lawyer. And she's going to need a good criminal defense attorney, I predict, because her story is completely disintegrating. And anybody else in this case, including any other accuser who made a false statement, is also in legal jeopardy. And it's probably a good idea that the FBI launched this investigation, because they'll be looking into the truthfulness and credibility
We never
of
seem
these
to
accusations.
follow up on these things, but you're both right. Let me go to other new details. We have a letter from a boyfriend of Professor Ford. I witnessed Dr. Ford help McClain prepare for potential polygraph exam, and Dr. Ford explained in detail what to expect, how polygraphs worked, and helped McClain become familiar and less nervous about the exam. Dr. Ford was able to help because of her background in psychology. What are we to take out of that?
Oh, this is incredible, Sean. And I agree 100% with Alan Dershowitz and with Greg Jarrett. If they were lying, we should not ignore this. If they find out they were caught in perjury, they should be prosecuted for this, because this is a man's life and his family that's at stake. Not only that, it discredits every other woman that's been through sexual assault.
Forget this other issue. Let me ask you this. every single case from Professor Ford, she identified an eyewitness who does not agree with her allegation or account. The same thing, the story of Miss Ramirez and the gaps in memory and inebriation, et cetera. And even the New York Times said she was asking people, I don't remember, but do you? Was it him? I'm not sure.
Yeah, they're calling people. She's calling people. Mrs. Ramirez, was it him? Could it be him? They're just throwing allegations out there. This is a disinformation campaign with one objective in mind, to destroy Judge Kavanaugh. And God bless him. If he is actually standing up for what he believes in and fighting this back, he needs to continue to fight this.
The accusation will stay with him forever.
It will. But you know what, Sean? At this point in time, he can fight this, and the people will stand up and believe him. We cannot walk away from this.
But the real villain of this is the American Civil Liberties Union, on whose board I served with honor for many years when it was the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, instead of the ACLU, the Anti-Civil Liberties Union. They are now saying that suspicion is enough, that presumptions ought to be in favor of guilt, that if there's doubt, you convict. Imagine if they had said that during the McCarthy period. During the McCarthy period, they never said when people were fired from their jobs, this is just a job interview. They required proof by a high standard. But when it comes to this, they are making a fortune of money. Their budget has gone from $20 million to $130 million because they've abandoned civil liberties and have one campaign: get Trump, get his appointments, get his nominees.
Sean, the good news is the American public are not buying this. There's a new Harris-Harvard poll out. 60% say Kavanaugh should be confirmed absent any corroborating evidence against him, and so far there is none.
Been corroborating evidence, which is
exactly.
This is so foundational to our country's system.
And 75% say Dianne Feinstein is to blame for this national disgrace for withholding information.
Let's wait and see until all the evidence comes out. I want to keep an open mind. If there are information that is disqualifying, then
as of now, there's nothing.
We have to look at the evidence. Follow the evidence, not the polemics.
Absolutely. And Americans aren't stupid, Sean. Americans know what's going on here. They're going to follow that. That's why we're seeing the polls the way they are. And that's why people are going to go out to vote. That's right.
American people usually get it right. I trust them.
We do.
All right. Good to see you. Thank you all for being with us. When we come back, Dan Bongino, Steve Doocy, rare late night appearance, Sean Spicer. They'll weigh in on the media's effort to smear Judge Kavanaugh. Busy breaking news night. We're in Washington, D.C. We're glad you are with us.
I said the 2016 election may have been the greatest election of all time. There's never been anything like this. We had to fight the Democrats, but more difficult was fighting a very, very dishonest media. That was much more difficult. Fighting the media is tougher than fighting the Democrats, but they're equal partners.
All right, that was the president slamming the mainstream media bias and the collusion with the Democratic Party. Here now with reaction, the author of a brand new book, The Happy Cookbook. He's a good friend of mine now from the beginning of our Fox days. We begin our 23rd year, believe it or not. Fox and Friends co-host Steve Doocy, #1 cable show in the morning, and former White House press secretary Sean Spicer, NRA TV contributor, former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino. All right, Mr. Doocy. So, first of all, you put in your book my corned beef and cabbage recipe, which is the best
on page 100. Oh, it's on page 181.
Yeah, why am I not on page 3 or 1? Who do I get? Let me guess. You put Brian and Ainsley first and me last. I got it.
There. Okay, calm down, please. You're in the corned beef and cabbage department. You can't put that up in appetizers. Don't you know how cookbooks work, baby?
It's the best. I was a cook at 13 in a real restaurant pub.
When Sean Hannity was 12, he worked as a dishwasher at the Norwood Inn in West Hempstead. Right. He was making $2.25 an hour. The boss could see he was driven. He needed help on the grill, so he gave him a 50-cent raise, and that's where he learned how to cook stuff.
And true story.
181.
Oh, it's a long story, but honestly, it was the best thing I ever did. And I got not only $2.25 an hour, but 2 St. Pauli girls at the end of the night. And I walk home the happiest 12-year-old in the country. What do you make, Steve? Look, we've been doing this a while.
Yep.
I've never seen it this bad, and I've never seen a smear effort this bad.
Well, you know, I watch your show, and I know you have a lot of guests on who say that the media are out to get Donald Trump. But you look at the media landscape these days, and the standards have just changed. I mean, I grew up working in newsrooms where if you had a bias against the person you were going to cover, the boss wouldn't send you out on the story. But then you look at this story, the big headline this morning in the New York Times was about back in 1985, Brett Kavanaugh was in a bar fight. And then you read it, and it's like
ice.
He threw ice, exactly. Well, who did the New York Times assign that story? A woman who back in July did on Twitter revealed that she was anti-Kavanaugh. And nonetheless, they assigned her to do that. And then later in the day, the New York Times said, you know what, we probably shouldn't have sent her. But it's just another one of those things.
Sean, look, you had to deal with this. Sarah Sanders is now stuck in that job. I feel sorry for her. I felt sorry for you at the time. It's never been this bad.
No, and it gets worse every day. I think Steve's point is exactly right. I mean, not just did they send a reporter in from the New York Times who had publicly stated her hatred and her animosity towards Brett Kavanaugh and conservatives in general. But then the New York Times afterwards said, well, she might not have been the best person. We stand by it. I think NBC, the Washington Post, all these other stories, they've lost all sense of objectivity to the point where for all of their talk about lying and truth-telling and facts, the other day prior to the hearing, Andrea Mitchell's on air talking about how many people helped Brett Kavanaugh prepare his testimony. What's the first thing Kavanaugh says coming out of the gate? Nobody helped me prepare this testimony. And
I wrote it myself.
And yet I wrote it myself. No one has reviewed it. And yet NBC News didn't say a word afterwards to correct that. So for all of their pious talk about caring about facts and the truth, they are so against this president.
They're full of it. Dan Bongino.
You know, Sean, remember after the election, I know Sean Spicer remembers this, when the New York Times and the Washington Post said, hey, we'll do better. We blew the 2016 election. Now it seems their motto is, how can we make this worse, right? Let me just make two quick examples here about their double standard. So they're claiming now that Kavanaugh doesn't have the temperament and that he's like Captain Angry right now, right? Remember when Eric Holder nearly challenged Louis Gohmert to a fight? He said, you don't want to go there, buddy. The media loved him. They thought it was great. And one more thing. Barack Obama himself, Sean, he wrote his book about hanging with the Choom Gang. What the hell's the Choom Gang?
Did you see what I played tonight?
The Choom Gang. Yeah, I heard. I've been listening to the whole.
Steve Ducey saw it. I could tell by his laughing. You saw it, Steve, right?
Yeah, I've got, by the way, there's a brownie waffle recipe in here that is perfect.
Listen, no, the only reason to buy the book is my corned beef and cabbage recipe.
I was going to say, look, I just want to make sure we remind everyone that this confirmation is a serious issue. These charges are serious issues. Unfortunately, what the media has done has taken a serious confirmation and serious allegations and turned them into a complete circus. This is disgusting what is going on. And I think that this is horrible. There's a reason that the public continues to lose faith in this. In the media, it's because you watch the president do stuff like NAFTA and all these other things.
I declared media dead in 2008.
I know you did. I still have faith in the country. I believe that there are still good reporters out there, and it's unfortunate.
On your book, I know you keep on your book tour. Dan Bongino also. Steve, what page am I on again in your new book?
181.
Yeah, dump me in the back. Put everybody else up there.
You're in the meat and potatoes department.
Corned beef and cabbage.
Gonna go viral.
My water recipe should be up there too, Ducey. That was good.
Wait a minute. What was Brian and Ainsley's recipes?
Ainsley's is chicken divan, and we're going to make that tomorrow on the show. Mine's was my mom's pot roast, and Brian's was his mother's meatballs. All delicious.
Can't believe Brian's off tonight. Brian works in the morning. He works outnumbered. He works to 5.
Hourly.
He fills in for Tucker. All right. Congrats on the book, all of you guys. Thank you for being with us. When we come back, why are Democrats up? Why aren't they up in arms about Keith Ellison? When we come back, Ed Henry has a full report. That's next. All right, now with the latest on the accusations facing Minnesota AG candidate and, of course, the number 2, the deputy DNC chair, Keith Ellison, Fox News chief national correspondent here in studio. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Sean.
Ed Henry, how are you?
Good, fantastic. And it's interesting because Democrats have dumped these unverified 36-year-old allegations about Judge Kavanaugh to try and block him from the high court. Yet they have said very little about much more recent, on the record, in some cases verifiable allegations of abuse by a sitting congressman. You mentioned number 2 at the DNC and running to be be the top law enforcement official in Minnesota. That state's Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate, Karen Housley, is demanding a new investigation by the state attorney general office into the allegations of domestic abuse that have been lodged against Keith Ellison, all of which he has vehemently denied. Interesting, because Housley is taking on Democratic Senator Tina Smith. Remember, she replaced Al Franken after he resigned amid sexual harassment allegations. Smith has lashed out at Kavanaugh, flatly charged without evidence that he, quote, committed sexual assault. Smith and Minnesota's other Democratic Senator, Amy Klobuchar, have both been calling for swift probes of the charges against Kavanaugh, but have been less aggressive about taking on Ellison. Nancy Pelosi has said the House Ethics Panel can take care of all of this. Now, former Ellison girlfriend Karen Monahan has alleged he once dragged her off of bed while shouting profanities, sent abusive texts, and engaged in other physical and emotional abuse, and has also provided medical records, other documentation. Now, the Democratic Party in Minnesota brought in a lawyer to investigate this. They say that lawyer was not able to substantiate the claims. Again, it was hired by the Democratic Party. So it's raised questions about why Democrats have been so vocal in going after Kavanaugh, but not going after one of their own, Sean.
Well, we do have also Senator Grassley sending a letter to the attorneys for Professor Ford. They want therapy notes. They want any evidence of the polygraph, how it was administered, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot going
By the way, Bob Corker tonight, not always a fan of the president, he predicted to the Hill TV
he did.
Kavanaugh will be confirmed. He says the Democrats.
You would have watched my opening monologue. You would have seen that.
I mean, it was shorter tonight than usual. I like to tease you about that.
Take that. Anyway, thank you, Ed Henry. Joining us now, Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate from Minnesota, Karen